1 week season.
1 week season, fam. La Familia. Welcome back to another week of Wake and Snake. I am your host, M. Johnson86, Mike Johnson, coming to you. We are recording this on the evening of Memorial Day. This will be posted Tuesday, May 27th. Figured most people would be doing other things on Monday anyways, so figured we would get it in tonight. Send something out in the Discord, see if there's anybody, any of our subscribers have specific situations or players, teams they'd like us to touch on. Once again, we come to you weekly. Myself and my esteemed colleague, Billy Gableman, Stat ATL. We will do a live draft, usually on Drafters. Sometimes we'll sprout out to DraftKings or Underdog, but usually on Drafters, and that's where we'll be going today. We do have Billy. He will be the one drafting this week. So we get to see him draft. We're going to lock in. Once again, want to bring up to you guys, do not forget, if you are new to Drafters, use code OWS for a 100% deposit match on your first deposit up to $100. So $100 on, use code OWS, you will end up with $200. And I, can't say enough about how good of an investment relative to the other best ball offerings out there that is. Again, of course, we are oneweekseason.com. Anyone new tuning in, we have our best ball basics package. It's $29. And then we also have our best ball plus package, which really goes deeper into the basics, is rankings, some written works, kind of just gives you everything you need if you're newer, or if you're newer and just want to get a little bit of information and dip your toes in the water, that's probably for you. The Best Ball Plus, we really dive into the game theory and how to approach and attack these contests and put yourself in the best position to win in the short and long term. That is $99. And yeah, we've got a lot more that goes into that beyond the basic package. So highly recommend you check that out. With all of that, we will get into it. I'm going to bring on Billy. Welcome, Billy. How are you today?
Happy Memorial Day to you, Mike. How's it going, bud?
Doing well. Had a nice little weekend with the fam. The weather has finally turned here in chilly Wisconsin. It seems like every year spring lasts a little bit longer. So was able to get some yard work done, golf a little bit, and a little bit of everything. And now post Memorial Day, I feel like that's really when best ball summer really kind of kicks off. So excited to get going with that. As I told the listeners and viewers, you will be drafting. Looks like you drew the 3 spot. So you'll be up in just a little bit here.
I think OWS subscribers are not going to know what to do with themselves. We're not drafting out of the 12 spot, so it'll have to be completely different perspective for them today.
Yeah, and I do. I really enjoy, frankly, there's different. That's one thing I guess we don't talk a lot about, or we do here or there, but don't dive into too often. But draft position, over the years and even season-long fantasy players and that sort of thing, you'll hear people complain about, I didn't get the first pick, or I never get the first pick, or whatever. But and that's one of the things I've kind of uncovered is in a lot of my research is over the last 4 or 5 years, really kind of the optimal place to draft can vary. It can be kind of all over the place depending on how seasons play out. Just the nature of snake drafts, and particularly in best ball, just because, even if I think it was a couple of years ago, Christian McCaffrey had like a monster season from the number 1 spot, or he was usually the number 1 pick. But almost all of those guys who were going in the 2nd and 3rd round that year kind of bombed, had really down seasons. So it ended up, kind of basically all in 2023 of the top teams in this format were drafted from the back half of the round. Last year, and I talk a little bit about this in the training sessions that are coming up. Jamar Chase obviously was like the kind of the guy in that first round, and he kind of fluctuated. In studying the top 100 teams from last year, there was times where he was going as high as second or third, and there was times I think the winner got him at the seventh or eighth pick. So he was a little different than you've seen some years. But I think kind of where I'm going with all of it is just the strategy angles as you get deeper into drafts. I kind of like picking from like the 3 or the 10 spot, because you can kind of predict what the guy's going after you in those 4 picks after you pick. You kind of see their roster construction, kind of predict what they might do, so that can help you make your first pick based on that information, and kind of maybe get both of your players just from being kind of aware of what's going on around you.
Yeah, and that definitely, I feel like that comes into play a little bit later. Obviously so early in the draft, you can't figure any of that out. But yeah, I think once you start to get to like the double-digit rounds, being able to see, oh, this guy's only got, one running back through 9 picks. Like if there's a guy I really want, and, I probably don't want to push it to him because strong possibility he's going to take one. But kind of speaking of the guys around me, and maybe I'm just going to be way off base here, the guy in the 2-hole, Dorito, is that the winner from 2 years ago?
I think it's Do Re Do.
Okay.
Like Do Re Fa Do Re Fa Sol La Ti Do. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Special Memorial Day surprise for everyone Mike tries to sing.
Usually you got to pay extra for that. So
that's usually we usually save that for the Best Ball Plus package, but we've got it on the free feed this week. So you're welcome to everyone out there. Nice. Jefferson and Garrett Wilson to start out. So we've got Justin Jefferson, Garrett Wilson. Wilson is a guy who, it's like an interesting case study, right? Because you've got the Jets, obviously, the Aaron Rodgers saga is gone. Looks like Justin Fields is going to be their guy. They paid him, it was 2 years, $40 million, which is actually like low end for a starter, like very low end. But they didn't draft anyone, and it seems like they're going to roll with him. And their head coach, I believe Aaron Glenn, is their head coach, and he was previously the Lions defensive coordinator, and Fields torched him several times with the Bears. So, I mean, it seems like they're pretty committed to him, but that likely is going to be a run-based offense. So Wilson, you're seeing him, you took him here at the 22nd pick, end of the second round, but he's usually around that 2-3 turn. Sometimes he falls into like the mid third round, and last year he was like somewhere in the 8 to 12 range, basically every draft. So that's, it's only a round and a half, but that's a lot of draft capital at that point in the draft, right? That's a big difference than a guy dropping from like the end of the 9th round to the middle of the 11th, right? That, these are high premium capital. So, it's interesting because we just had a couple of years ago, DJ Moore had like a top 5 wide receiver season with Fields as his quarterback. I was looking
before we hopped on just 5 minutes ago. DJ Moore, I mean, I haven't done a ton of these drafts so far. I'm going to look and cheat to see where I'm at in terms of the $20 draft. This is my 14th. I think DJ Moore is my second highest drafted player so far. I find myself clicking him a lot between pick 40 and 46. I prefer like Xavier Worthy to him, but I feel like Xavier Worthy's generally going this 3-4 turn. Like he doesn't typically get past like 38 or 39. And for me, like I don't know that there's guys that I really like a lot in this in this range. I know you may be a little higher on James Cook than I am. Like, I have a hard time taking McMillan, just like such an unknown factor on, not a great offense. Like, it's, I don't know. I feel like I get to this spot between 40 and 46, and I've been clicking DJ Moore a lot. So
yeah, yeah, and like I said, he had that top 5 season with Justin Fields. He's obviously super, super talented. Last year it was weird. He was like making these comments that were like he was kind of like quitting on the team without quitting, like quiet quitting, I guess. His body language was really poor, was making comments to the press. So there was a lot going on last year. Obviously, totally new regime. You've got Ben Johnson in there. I mean, if there is a guy if there is an offensive coach, in the league that you would be pretty confident about his ability to creatively use talented players, it would be Ben Johnson. And I mean, you're paying for it. It's not like you're getting some steep discount on Moore after a down season. But we've seen that. We've seen a wide receiver 6 season out of him. Rome Odunze, he was in a similar situation to Moore, but he was just a rookie. But, we haven't seen him necessarily be better than Moore. And then Luther Burden and Colston Loveland, they're rookies. So, Moore could easily be that alpha on a very good team. Certainly not going to knock on him. And kind of tying it together with where I was going with Wilson is just, Wilson is a guy who we saw and we know the importance of top 5, top 10 type wide receiver seasons in this format. And Wilson could be a 30% target share guy. And he's talented enough that, Aaron Glenn even made comments this week. Somebody asked him about Garrett Wilson and what have you learned about him? Like, just get him the ball as often as you can. So certainly encouraging there. Whereas last year they added Adams and that kind of, changed his outlook from a target perspective. Where are we going here, Billy?
I think I'm going to go 5th wide receiver. I'm going to go buying in bulk strategy.
There you go.
I mean, I feel like I got 5 number 1 wide receivers on their team. This could be a roster where maybe I only end up drafting 8, maybe even just 7 wide receivers. And just line up. To me, that was kind of an inflection point on this draft just now. Am I going Marion Hampton? Am I grabbing Joe Mixon, Kenneth Walker here? Just because by the time I get back to 70, it's a little bit lesser running backs that are there. But I kind of feel the same way about wide receivers, although you still have some potentially really strong wide receiver ones like Stephon Diggs, who are going in the mid 70s as their typical ADP, obviously coming off injury, but I don't know. I'm going to try to go maybe 5. We'll see what the board presents, but I don't know. I feel like I like to try to do things a little bit different than just kind of sticking to the same, what feels comfortable every time and just kind of seeing what it brings. And, I know behind the paywall, we talk about more stuff about what construction needs to look like when you're kind of making sacrifices, like not drafting a running back in the first 5, maybe 6 rounds, what we need to do to potentially offset that. So not a build I typically run with 5 straight wide receivers. Typically I've either gone with, a more elite running back or more elite quarterback. I'm not one who typically takes Bowers or McBride. But yeah, this is kind of a different build for me. Just kind of see what the board pulls out, going 5 straight. We might even go 6 straight wide receivers.
Look at you coming in hot. Mr. 2 weeks ago, I haven't really gotten into it, not really drafted, and now I think you're 50 drafts in across the 2 contests.
Yeah, I've done 35 of the $2.
Summer is here, and
Summer's
Billy.
here. What else am I doing?
Billy Billy is just cannonballing into the best ball waters, and we are here for it.
I know we haven't talked. Where are you in terms of drafts? I think you were saying you may want to try to target 20 or 25 by the end of the month to try to get that bonus.
Yeah, that's by the end of June. For June 30th is when that bonus and the $20 the bonus is basically double.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, I think I'm at like 5 in that one, a little over 50 in the $2, which is that one is trying to do some quick math, about a third full. The $2 is so. As things kind of pick up and progress, I would guess we're looking at the end of June, around the 4th of July or end of June, kind of similar to last year.
Yep.
James Conner with the 70th pick. There you go.
Yeah, like it, get a little bit of that Arizona
offense. I can dig it.
Yeah, and I think for me that probably means at 94 or whenever I'll pick again, 94, 99, probably be targeting Kyler in that turn, since I've now got 2 Cardinals. But we'll see. Just something to kind of keep in mind. I don't know if Montgomery's on the board here. I don't know if I want to do that and double my first 2 running backs with bye week 8s. I think I may lean in here and go a little early on Aaron Jones and double up with Jefferson there, and just have two offenses that I'm potentially going to bet on here.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of been an approach I've been leaning into a little bit more this season, of maybe trying to target 2 or 3, generally like 2 teams where I want to have a little bit more correlation, really lean into those offenses. It's tougher if they're where you got to use a lot of draft capital. But again, Minnesota's kind of a team where outside of Justin Jefferson, you could grab Addison, typically 5th round, 6th round. Yeah, 6th round, I think you went at 64. And, Aaron Jones typically 7th round. So, if you decide if you want to get some correlation, you can be a little,
right.
Not a ton of draft capital to have to do that.
Yeah. Well, and it's you're
betting on good offenses too. It's not like I'm saying, hey, let's load up on the
thing with running backs too is the reality of betting on running backs, or when you take running backs, is so much of what they do is a function of how well the offense is playing. And if the Arizona offense is playing well, there's pretty high likelihood Marvin Harrison's having a nice season, because him and McBride are really all that they have. The rest of their receiver tight end room, there's not much there. And then Minnesota, Aaron Jones, he's obviously the running back 1. If he's having a nice season, it's not like Jefferson's going to, have his worst career season or miss a ton of time, and Jones has a good season. So, I think that those are exactly the type of players where it makes a ton of sense. When you took Wilson, I was going to mention with like Breece Hall, he's kind of in a similar situation to Wilson. But I do think that might be a little bit different of a situation than this Arizona and Minnesota one, just because the draft capital involved, and the fact that, if Hall were to have a massive season, he ends up as a top 5 running back. I think that would probably be more, they just became so run heavy that Wilson, he might have another pedestrian type season, if that makes sense. So I think sometimes people try to put, these broad rules as like, stack these players, this is good. But every situation is very different based on context.
Yeah, just trying to take a look at what teams to my left have. I feel like this is a spot where at 99 or whatever it is, sorry, I don't actually. Yeah, 99. Like I'm probably either take Justin Fields or actually, I mean, I feel like I'm going to grab Jalen Warren here, grab a third running back, and then probably just take one of those two quarterbacks with the likelihood that with Baker on the board that both
Who
of
you
them
Fields or Baker?
Fields or Kyler, just because
Yeah.
I have Harrison and Connor already.
Right.
And
One of them might take Baker.
Yeah, one of them. I mean, I don't think both of them are taking a quarterback here. Even if they do, like it's likely that Fields or Murray, one of them is there, since they would be they'd be taking them naked, either of them. So that's kind of my thinking. I'm happy to grab the running back. Actually, he took two quarterbacks.
Mhm.
I'm happy to grab a running back here just because that's a little bit where this team is a little weaker. Sorry, I'm using my wife's computer there, so I don't use a Mac all that often. I guess with Cortland Sutton, like this is a spot I could grab Bo Nix as well. I think I'm gonna go Justin Fields just because I don't have a lot of. I don't know that I have a single Justin Fields team.
There you go.
Again, let's just do something a little bit different.
I cannot stop clicking Jonnu Smith.
Honestly, that was going to be the option of where I considered like not doing anything and then just seeing if there was a quarterback that came back to me at 118 that has the correlation, or am I potentially, waiting, to take JJ McCarthy later just because of that correlation as well. But yeah, I find myself taking Jonnu Smith a ton. What did he end up like? Tight end 2 for like the second half of the season last year, and you're generally getting him in the 9th, 10th round. It feels like kind of a steal.
Right. And he's a guy where so how are the situations? And so people can always say, well, what if a guy gets hurt? But you could say that about any NFL player. So when you're making an evaluation, you're trying to think about things. It's, what are the ways that these things could play out? So if they approach things the same way as last year, Jonnu and Achane were like the focal points, just getting peppered with these short area targets because their line was bad. They didn't really have time to drop back and attack downfield, get Hill and Waddle open as often as they probably would have liked. So Jonnu and Achane they were getting like 12 to 15 targets a week between the two of them. And that's kind of what Jonnu rode. So I guess the idea that he would be ranked where he is now and that there wouldn't be that carryover from last year, even though he performed really well, would be on that they shift more back to Hill and Waddle. Well, and I talk about this in one of our written pieces. It doesn't really make sense because those guys haven't shifted either. They're kind of devalued as well. But even in the scenario where they do that and the offense becomes more explosive and is hitting Hill and Waddle and those guys are becoming more focal points, well, then it's a really high-end offense. So again, why is he falling to pick 112 like he is here? Being a 9th or 10th round pick, he's either going to be a target hog again in the short area, or the offense is really, really good, and he's just going to benefit from the rising tide, lifting him maybe in a little bit different way. It might be a little more touchdown dependent, maybe some big plays that get opened up from them being able to have longer developing pass plays. But one way or the other, he's a guy I just can't stop clicking.
Okay, kind of I'm leaning taking Mark Andrews here, just because I'm not used to seeing him fall this far. I'm gonna do it. I'm just thinking I've already got Zay Flowers. How much betting on this passing offense do I really want? I think it's something we talked about last year, unrelated here, but I've found myself on probably, I think I've done like 40 or 50 teams now between the $20 and the $2. And probably 50% of the time that I take Mark Andrews, I also take Isaiah Likely and just kind of bet on that position. Just because of how late compared to seasons past, the draft capital you've been able to get. All right, so where am I wanting to go here? Let's take Stevenson here and get another running back. We're gonna kind of I don't want to say hope, but I'm going to hope that JJ McCarthy comes back to me. Not that I'm in dire need of a second quarterback, but in terms of correlation, like I'm gonna hope that he falls 6 spots, 8 spots compared to ADP. We'll see.
Yeah, I think, those are two situations. So McCarthy and then Darnold, Darnold going to Seattle, McCarthy going, kind of being handed the reins. Those are two spots where how that all plays out, will have a huge impact on really how the whole season works out, just because, and I talk about it in our team previews for the NFC. I talk about Minnesota, and you've had Kirk Cousins, you've had Sam Darnold, very much more like pocket presence type quarterbacks. McCarthy is probably the most willing runner and best athlete that they've had at the quarterback position. And so that could really open some things up in terms of how O'Connell calls plays for the Vikings. And they could be a really, really fun offense. And then, of course, Darnold, was it all just, system quarterback type situation? Or is he, is him going to Seattle? You've got JSN who, he was actually I think the wide receiver 6 or 7 last season, and now they lost Metcalf and Lockett. He's a pretty interesting guy, going pretty often in like the 3rd round, where it's like, he's coming off a top 10 season. Granted, there was a ton of wide receiver injury last year.
He's not going to be there. JJ McCarthy's going to go right here at 136 with a guy who's got Addison and Hawkinson and one quarterback and just Caleb Williams.
Potentially.
Yeah, that would make sense. It's just, again, one of those things where I feel like when I do a slow draft, right where I thought he would go. I feel like when I do the slow drafts, like I take a lot more time to like look and see, okay, how is the board likely to play out on guys like that I'm hoping might fall, half a round or whatever. Where I feel like that's something that's hard to do on a fast draft, like keep an eye on 11 other teams. Do you find yourself doing that when you're doing slow drafts, kind of keeping an eye before you make your pick, or if there's somebody that you kind of like that you'd have to pull up half a round or a round? Do you find yourself looking at what the other teams around you have done? Or
I think that's kind of the point of it, besides just finding other ways to get the volume in. But yeah, that's for sure the kind of the optimal way. There's some other value, especially in like some of the snapshot contests, just with extending your window of information. This is an interesting pick for you.
Yeah, I think I know what I want to do. I think I'm happy to go Lawrence here, actually. Just because I feel like there are Jags that I can kind of backstack him with late. Even if it's, Brenton Strange and, what's the wide receiver 3 that just signed? Diami Brown. Like guys that you can get, 15th to 20th round, like late guys where I could, and again, I need a tight end. I've only got Andrews so far. So
I was surprised you didn't take one there, but it looks like I'm gonna fall back to you here. Oh yeah, they're still both there. I think Warren and Kincaid. this is great talking points. Do whatever you want to do, but then I'm going to talk about them. You could also take Ray Davis. I think there's a big drop off in terms of quality of running back after him.
Say that again.
I think there's a big drop off in running back quality after Davis, but Warren and Kincaid, same thing at tight end.
I think Ray Davis. When we were talking in like the third or fourth round, and I was telling you that I feel like I'm a little lower on Cook than I feel like you are. It's because I'm high on Ray Davis. I feel like I take him between 140 and 150, like in this range, whenever I'm in the front half of a draft.
Yeah, and so like last year for me, Cook was like a 6th round pick. Davis was like 11th or 12th sometimes, usually in the 11th round. And I think I had like 30% Cook and 28% Davis. Like they were like my 2 highest owned running backs. Just because it was like I was betting on that situation, just betting on that offense. The acquisition cost was not too tough. Cook obviously had the much better season, kind of was the dominant guy. They still have Ty Johnson there who, he contributed last year and was kind of the passing down guy. So who knows if he kind of keeps that. But Davis looked really good when he got opportunities. And now Cook, you're paying, again, we talked about it at the start with Garrett Wilson, but like Cook's kind of the opposite of that. You're paying almost a 2-round premium, a round and a half to 2-round premium this year compared to last year. So, yeah, I really like Davis. Warren and Kincaid, man.
I feel like you would have gone Warren there in my shoes. I feel like you would have gone tight end.
Yeah, so Kincaid is a guy that, so we're talking about Davis with Buffalo, but like, Dawson Knox is a year older. Kincaid is in his 3rd season. Tight ends take a little bit to develop sometimes. I think he missed some time last year too. But like you're paying literally, he was like a 5th or 6th round pick last year as well. And now he's, he was there in the 13th, right?
Okay.
And then Warren, they used the top 15 pick on him. I think it's a mistake for people. I'm not like over the top on Warren, but it's one of those situations where I think there's too much stock being put into what the Colts have done historically or how they've done things. Like he is not splitting time in a 3 or 4-way split. They used the top 15 pick on this guy. There's a lot of talk about like all these, they've got Pittman, they've got Downs, they've got Alec Pierce, but like none of those guys has like asserted like is that guy, right? They've all had moments and stuff. And so I think that, Kincaid with the offense he's tied to being in his 3rd year, and then Warren kind of stepping into a situation where it's like they wanted him. He's going to alter how they play offense, right? There are thermostat players and there are thermometer players. Thermostat player, they set the temperature for how their offense will operate. And thermometer players, they fill roles in however they are needed. They're gauging, the environment around them. And I think Warren, just based on how the Colts front office has talked about him, he's a guy I wasn't like as a prospect athletically, like he's solid. He had some nice games at Penn State, but like I think some people were a lot higher on him than I was. But none of that matters. Like when he is now being like he was there in the 13th this time, but usually he's like an 11th or 12th round pick. It's just one of those like you've got to be willing to just like take your shots at certain points. I think not that you had to on this roster,
but you know what it would have been. It would have been a unique.
show.
just because of how late he kind of fell. It was a unique spot to grab him. I think why I went away and went Ray Davis, other than just me being high on him and what we talked about, is this was just a roster. Like, I didn't take a running back until like the 6th or 7th round. Like, I just needed quantity. And I think you and I are a little bit aligned there. Like, when you get to after Ray Davis, like, there's a bit of a drop off in terms of like expected. Like, I actually really like Braylon Allen, and worked out great with this team with having, Fields and Garrett Wilson. So, like, I've got a couple of bets on some. I don't know. I can't really call the Jets a strong offense, but on this roster, that's a bet I'm making is on.
Well, that's the thing about, is like, we don't know that they're going to be bad, right? Like, last year we kind of thought they might be good. Breece Hall, there's even been like trade rumors around Breece Hall. So, like, I talked before about like him and Wilson, but like, okay, like let's put the scenario forward. Braylon Allen, Breece Hall gets hurt again. Braylon Allen becomes like the guy on this power running team, or even he just becomes, you have Aaron Glenn coming from Detroit. And I know he's a defensive coach, but like, he knows what has worked for them.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to have a say. He is going to have some direction on what this team does. So you think of it, they have Justin Fields, not Jared Goff. Their offense is going to look different. But when you look at how they operate from a big picture, what has Detroit done? DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams, David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, like multiple running backs, high volume rushing, kind of role specific, and archetype specific. Could Braylon Allen be the David Montgomery? In that situation, again, Fields, if Allen, and then another situation is Hall has another injury, and then Allen just becomes the lead back, and if he's successful as a lead back, he's not the same pass catcher that Breece Hall is. So what would that do? Well, it would tell the story that, Wilson is dominating the target share even more so if you didn't have a guy like Hall catching passes.
I just took my 7th running back, Mike.
There you go.
I mean, we're really leaning into this 5 straight running wide receivers to start off the board, and we'll close out with some more dart throw guys.
Mm-hmm.
I know you know who I want to take at 195. We've only talked a few times, but it's way early, and I have any mother.
Yeah.
This is Diane Brown, probably, just to make sure.
That's what I figured you would do.
How do you feel about a build like this? Like, I'm not intending on taking another quarterback. I'm thinking this is Fields and Lawrence, and we're running with it.
Who are the quarterbacks available still? I think
nothing. I mean, Tyler Shaw, if I want to go that route.
I wouldn't hate Rodgers on this build. You have Warren.
With the thought of him going to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and Rodgers, he will target. He's all about being able to say he hasn't thrown many interceptions, so he holds the ball forever, takes too many sacks, checks down to running backs a ton. Mm-hmm. I think I talked about. I actually talked about in my most recent article on the Scroll for our subscribers, Pittsburgh running back situation was something that I touched on, just that, Caleb Johnson being drafted way ahead of Jaylen Warren, I get it on some level, but at the same time, like Warren, if they do sign Rodgers, right, Warren is the guy who's, like, that's what he does. He catches passes. He's a space back, pass catching back. He's a veteran. Rodgers will trust him. He'll earn Rodgers' trust. So I think there's a lot of upside for him. And obviously, like, what is Warren's? If you want to scroll back up, I guess we're going a little deeper in strategy than we do sometimes, but that's all right. I'm going to scroll back up to further so I can see earlier in your team.
Okay.
Way up. So, like, you see your team, right? You have Connor, Jones, Warren are your top running backs. So on this team, like you're going to need Warren to have a pretty good season, right? Most likely. Obviously, you've got some solid other running back picks, but
This is likely I need one of these. Yeah.
Right. The likelihood of them paying off the deeper in the draft you get, just realistically, is not as good. You're probably going to need Warren to have a pretty good season. And his best outlook for this season is they sign Aaron Rodgers. I mean, that's just bottom line. So for this specific roster, especially, I think taking Rodgers would make a ton of sense.
Okay.
And here's the other thing too to keep in mind with Rodgers. I think it still lists him as a Jet.
Mm-hmm. So he'd have a week 5 bye if he went to Pittsburgh.
But yeah, if we're telling that story, he signs with Pittsburgh, he would be a week 5 bye. And another, when you're drafting this time of year, you try to think, where could these guys be going in, mid-July through August? And if Rodgers signs, he's probably going around like Stafford, Young, Geno,
probably
somewhere in the after
13th, 14th,
after Lawrence and Tua probably, and then he's kind of in the mix with all the rest of those guys. Because if he signs, then he's like a locked-in starter, right? Like I can't imagine they just straight up bench him. So yeah, I mean, you're gaining 5 rounds of value plus Warren probably gets a bump. Where are the other guys around you with quarterbacks?
So this guy has 3. This guy has 2. Just he's got Tua and Goff. I think I'm gonna go grab Aaron Rodgers now.
Okay.
And then next pick, I'm hoping to just take Roman Wilson, and I'll just double down on that bet.
Yeah, and I think another thing to just like a talking point or way to think through it is, so like at this point in the draft, if you had tried to push it with Rodgers there, which
what am I gaining?
Right. Like these are all dart throws at these other positions. So like if there's a guy like that who fits your roster as well as Rodgers does here, it doesn't make sense to be like, oh, I'm going to try to get this. I'm going to try to get him at, scroll down quick.
To my last pick?
Scroll down on the big draft board. I'm going to try to get him at 219 instead of 214. Like, what are you? Yeah.
I'm not gaining anything,
You right. And that's to kind of tying it together with what we were talking about at the start of the draft is, 6, 12, 18 picks early in the draft is a huge deal. Even in like those mid rounds, if you can, in the 8th, 9th, 10th round, if you can kind of read the board around you and get 2 guys that you have valued above a certain range instead of just one, and then the other one gets taken because, positional needs were there for your opponents that, you didn't pay attention to. There's a lot of value to be lost there, I guess. And yeah, I figured you'd go tight end here. I want to talk about while he's up, you got Taysom Hill up because people brought him
up in Discord today or yesterday.
So I just want to talk about him. I just think he's so much more valuable potentially in like underdog maybe, or DraftKings. Like his value at this point is that he comes back middle of the season and then he's on the roster and he's hanging around and they throw him out there. He has a big game somewhere in the playoffs. in general, I don't like him even in that setting personally. But that's like the story where you could tell. I think he's potentially a really dead roster spot for you. And guys like that, like Brandon Ayuk, he's a guy who I have pretty significant rankings differences between DraftKings and drafters for him. Because in drafters, like, you're going to use a 7th, maybe early 8th round pick on a guy who he could miss 6-7 weeks. That's very different than DraftKings, where like, okay, this guy's got multiple top 15 seasons. He'll come back early to mid part of the year, and he could be kind of an X factor for you in the playoffs. So that's the type of stuff that really I think there's a lot of like copy paste in terms of rankings and how people think through drafts across the site. And I think that's one of the bigger edges that we can find is things like that on drafters.
Sure. Yeah, I'm not even sure where I would even go here at tight end, to be candid. I don't, outside of Cole Kmet on teams that I've taken a couple of Chicago pieces, I don't know that I've drafted. I mean,
really
I could take a shot on like Senat.
I really like Senat.
Okay.
2nd round pick in 2024, right? So he was drafted as a 2nd round pick, kind of an H-back type in college. He was kind of off a lot of people's radar. It was kind of surprising for a lot of people that he went in the 2nd round to the Commanders. But then obviously the Commanders were like kind of one of the stories of last season. But like Zach Ertz, he was actually like a 20th round pick on one of the higher teams in last year's drafters tournament. Kind of written off, right? He's not an overly athletic or, making people miss. There's a funny Twitter account that like, it's literally called, "Did Ertz break a tackle?" And then each time he makes a catch, they just post like, no. Because like literally, like when he catches it, the first defender he comes into like takes him down. Like, which, but point being, he's 35 years old. He's a year older than he was last year when we were ready to write him off. Obviously, he emerged. He was, Jaden Daniels trusts him, kind of fits in with what they're doing. But at the same time, like you have this guy, Ben Senat, not basically going undrafted, right? And if the thesis is, Ertz was basically left for dead when the Cardinals kind of were like, okay, that's enough. We're going to go to McBride a couple of years ago. And like he performed well last year, I guess he did what they needed him to do within that role. But as this offense evolves, as Senat has another year under his belt, again, like we talked about with Kincaid earlier, like tight ends, they take a bit to develop sometimes. And just like injuries happen in the NFL. And we just talked about Taysom. Here's another 35-year-old tight end. Like if Ertz goes down, like where does Senat, like where does he fit in? Like if Ertz were to retire tomorrow, like I don't think he will, but
if he did, you got to figure, he's going in this 13th, 14th round with like Kyle Pitts and Brenton Strange. And like, he's certainly going ahead of like, where, we get this run of guys in the 19th and 20th rounds, a lot of drafts where it's just like, okay, I'm going to take my 3rd or 4th tight end. And I'm just taking a guy. I got to figure he's going in that, Dalton Schultz, Kate Otten, like he's going 4 or 5 rounds earlier, if not more.
And Ertz was the tight end 7 last season. So like, if you just think about it from like the standpoint of like Ertz didn't do like anything like super special. He's not like overly, he's just kind of solid, right? He just, the presence of Daniels, they had a good running game. McLaurin on the outside,
Well, they got Debo now too, which will take some of those.
But my point being that like things just were opened up for him, right? And so if you were to put a younger, more athletic player in that position, maybe he actually does break a tackle or two. Sanad is like one of my favorite 19th, 20th round picks right now. And maybe I'll be way wrong, but like the acquisition cost is basically nothing. And you can kind of build some rosters on that. And if you're right, and you build the roster correctly around it, it could be a game changer.
Yeah. And you know what, if you get a decently strong year on this particular build from like Mark Andrews, like it doesn't matter if I get 0 usable weeks out of Ben Sinnott. Like, this early in the season, like in the draft season, like you're kind of just throwing a dart at the 18th or 19th round, 20th round. So,
for sure.
All right, let's recap it and get out of here if that works for you. I got an early morning meeting, so I think my first ever 3-7-7-3 draft.
History.
Huh?
Making history.
I don't know that I love it, but it's interesting. Quarterback, we have Fields, Trevor Lawrence, Aaron Rodgers. Running back, James Conner, Aaron Jones, Jalen Warren, Ramondre Stevenson, Ray Davis, Braylon Allen, Woody Marks. So, I feel like running back, probably the weakest spot on this build. Definitely took some shots on guys with upside, and we'll just kind of see how it shakes out 4 months from now. Wide receiver started off with, 5 straight: Justin Jefferson, Garrett Wilson, Marvin Harrison Jr., Cortland Sutton, Zay Flowers. Rounded it out with De'Ami Brown and Roman Wilson, hoping for a little bit of correlation there if Aaron Rodgers does sign. And then at tight end, we went Mark Andrews, Brenton Strange, and Ben Sinnott. So, I don't know. I feel like the roster's got some good correlation. Need some things to break right for it, as they always do. Certainly at running back. It's weak at running back, but I feel like I took 7 of them. So, tried to get some volume there.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts before we sign it off?
Yeah, I mean, I think good. I think, from a strategy lens and from a how it was built and, the logic on some of the picks makes sense. More importantly for viewers, I felt like that was our smoothest show of the season. Maybe we need to do that more. Have you draft? Because I feel like I wasn't chasing my tail as much as I am previous weeks. That's just an honest self-evaluation for the listeners.
Mike, you know what it is you have more to say this early in the season on the players. I'm still doing a lot of PGA golf. So when you're drafting, I have to fill more of the dead air. When it's the other way, it's smoother. I think maybe we do a couple more of me doing them, and then as we get into, July, August, where I really have a better grasp of what's going on with training camps and stuff like that. We've gotten through all 4 golf majors, then it'll be a different story.
There we go.
Got on a little Chambers Bay shirt on today. Like I
went with the red, white, and blue.
Yeah. I got red, white, and blue here. Look here. ATLs.
There you go. I think, look at that. People helping people. Like, it's like, just full circle from our earlier discussion. Like, we're filling our roles. We're finding, where do we fit? How does this thing fit together? In the Wake and Snake team, we're hitting mid-season form. So to the 1 week season listeners, get ready, because, we're getting hot. It's getting hot. Best ball summer is here. So with all that said, thank you all for listening and viewing. If you haven't turned us off after that little performance I just gave. But thank you as always for joining us. Once again, check us out if you are not already a subscriber. There is some free content within the scroll that you can kind of get a taste for what's going on. But we've got the team previews. I've got lots of written work up. Premium stuff is rolling in now. And we are hitting the ground running for Best Ball Plus. So thank you again. Thank you, Billy, for joining me and recording. Thank you to all who have served. We appreciate your service, including our own Hilo, who is a naval aviator himself. Thank you to everyone for joining us. Thank you to Billy for drafting a stellar team and helping us create some exhilarating conversation for our best ball brethren. With all that being said, I am Mike. He is Billy. We will see you next week.